We are going to be ready to start the session. All right. Thank you all for joining. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Sohel Shekha, who is the Senior Solution Architect at Outsystems and also the subject matter expert of security in Outsystems. Let me give you a brief introduction of Sohail. He's been a fantastic resource for us to reach out to as partners of OutSystems and get his advice and inputs on the architectures that we design and our security practices. He has an amazing experience in banking, cybersecurity, e-commerce, healthcare, retail, as well as in various architecture solutions like cloud, hybrid, and even other open source technologies. Uh, he's been awarded the most valuable professional MVP role for Microsoft 3 years in the running for 17, 18, and 19, and has had an extremely illustrious career in building, developing applications, and deploying high scale, high performance, secure applications. So, without further ado, let's give a big round of applause and warm welcome to Sohel Shekha, the speaker for today, who's going to tell us everything about how we can build and secure our environment in OutSystems. Sohel, all yours.
Thank you very much, Subbu. Was quite a extensive introduction. Thank you very much. But all right, if we are good to start, I'll skip. I mean, I've been already been introduced a lot, so I'll not do my introduction anymore. Uh, just to clarification, I work at OutSystems team, and that is why Subbu knows me because we have worked on a lot of opportunities, a lot of customer, lot of projects together, right? And yeah, that's most about how we have been connected. And I think some of you guys from the participants as well would have met me on, through some partners or some customers, right? So let's dive in. So how, today my topic is going to be more, I mean, I came to know that, Subbu is doing a very, amazing uh, idea about putting a security series, right? Series of security sessions for OutSystems application. And my session would be kind of a privilege to that, right? So it could be, we can consider this as a episode zero or a, chapter zero of that, right? Series, where I would be covering from a very 360-degree perspective, right? A very, you can say bird's eye view. What are the security controls available on OutSystems and on the platform, right? So, what are the systems available on the platforms? How what are available to make your application secure on the platform? And mostly, what how can you get your infosec clearance, right? So, what are the things available in the platform which can help you clear your infosec uh, testing, right? Or whatever the infosec pen test or SaaS or DAS and whatever, right? To make your applications live. Right? So that is what going to be my gist of my uh, talk. Part of it is going to be related to application security, right? So that is where we will start from. If you have any questions, we will give you the time, right? You can ask those questions, or you can use there's a chat option available there, or question answer session
Yes,
available in
yes,
the.
there is.
Okay.
Yeah, there is
All right,
Sohail.
yeah.
So
So
there is
you
a
can
chat
use.
option, and I think what we have. So this is the second episode, Sohail. The first episode we covered OutSystems user authorization with roles and how to use roles within OutSystems. I think today will be a good launchpad for for the attendees to understand OutSystems security at OutSystems as a whole. I think this will set the foundation for the future episodes to come out. As whenever you are comfortable during your presentation, we can take a quick break and encourage the team, the attendees to put questions on the chat, and we can take an answer, and then we can continue to move. We'll like to keep it as interactive as possible. So yeah, let's go ahead and let's have a great session, guys.
Thank you very much, Subbu. All right, so we'll start first with application security, right? What are the things which are available out systems, right, where you can keep your application secure, right, from an application perspective, right? Then we will talk about platform, right? Now, very first thing that you need to do in any application, right, to make it secure is putting a authentication, right, to any application, right? So there, if any application is accessed, it needs to have some kind of authentication, whether it is username, password, whether it is biometric, whether it is, you know, using your third party external tools to doing the authentication. There should be some level of authentication, right? Whether it is using OTP or phone number, right? So on and so forth. Now, what are the things which are available out of the box on the platform, right? So these are the methods of authentication which are available out of the box on the platform, right? And we will discuss about it one by one, right? So you might OutSystem has internal SSO as well, and which comes by default. So when you are creating any application on our by default, without configuring anything uh, on the authentication part, it by default uses OutSystem's internal authentication method, right? Which prompts user to enter the username and password that is stored in this. And there are some, cryptographic hash functions which are used using following practices in the industry to store the passwords, right? Again, so is the internal table which is the most suitable for your authentication, right? Uh, Whether or you're configuring with your external SSL users information, right, from an authentication perspective. Now, the internal SSL which will do username and password check. Okay, so there's no, you know, two-step authentication. There's no OTP kind of authentication or OTP or email-based OTP or anything like that available on OutSystems SSO out of the box. Okay. However, you can, after you do the normal username and password authentication using the OutSystems default method, you can add an custom check or an extra page where you can also do the additional two-factor authentication if that is what your requirement comes across. All right. Now moving on, the another authentication method or an option available on OutSystems is using Active Directories. A lot of companies these days, or I mean, even these days, uses Active Directories, right? So this is by default available in the platform, right? You can choose it, and then you can basically your domain directory. Now, when you configure Active Directory, your username and password gets authenticated or gets checked on your Active. So your passwords are not stored on the OutSystems database. Only the user information is stored on the user table, right? So your password are not stored on the platform. It is from your Active Directory, and then whatever the password and rules that you need to configure, right? Minimum characters, complexity of the password, all of that will be configured on your active correct user, and that username and password will be validated on your active directory. When you configure your active directory, OutSystems synchronizes your users, right, once a day, right? So it every day once it goes and synchronizes with your active directory, right? And your front end should be on their domain to be able to use the active directory, right? Now, the second option is also LDAP, right? Um, if you are using LDAP, you can also configure LDAP, and then similarly, exactly same level of configurations are available with LDAP as well, right? So your username and passwords will be authenticated or will be validated on your LDAP. Our systems will not store the password, only the user information will be stored. And then, like I mentioned, it will be synchronized today. Right? Very rarely used, right?
So,
But if you need, yeah,
yeah, Sohel, sorry,
yes, sir.
there is your voice is more or less clear to me, but there is some pieces that are getting cut. So maybe we go a little slower in terms of the pace of the voice. If anybody else is also having any audio issues, please put it in the chat. Let us know. Yeah, go ahead.
Is it okay now? Is it okay? My voice is
Yeah, yeah.
okay, clear?
Yeah, yeah, we can. I can hear your voice. There was someone in the chat who said that they couldn't hear you clearly. I can hear you clearly, but there were maybe a words here, one or two words which got missed. But yeah, we can go ahead. No issue.
Sure, sure. No, no
Okay.
problem, no problem. If you are not able to hear me again, yeah, so basically, yeah, like I mentioned, the Active Directory, LDAP, these are the options available. You can configure your LDAP, your Active Directory using OutSystems, and you can get your authentication done from there. Similarly, there is an integrated authentication method also available, and this is not rarely. I mean, this is not uh, very rarely it is used. Uh, you know, if you need to do your authentication using certificates, right? Then this authentication method gets used. I have not seen any customer, at least in India, using this, right? Um, this was used quite early, but I mean, old, but now there are a lot of other better technologies available. Most of them are, moved, and those are also, and again, this integrated authentication is very complicated. Dealing with certificates and all is very difficult, right? So that is why it is not widely used, but it is available on our system, right? So just wanted to give you what the options available. All right, moving on. Any questions so far on the what slides we presented so far? Right? Authentication options that are available.
Yeah, so there is a question in the chat. Will inactive users be deleted after a certain period of time, or will OutSystems maintain inactive users persistently?
Inactive users will be there persistently, though inactive users are not going to be counted across your license consumption, right? So let's say, I mean, I'm sure this is coming from someone who knows licensing or system works per user basis, right? So if the user is marked as inactive, it will not be counted in a license, but the user record will exist in the table unless and until you delete it programmatically, right? So you can run a script, right, or a timer which runs every 7 days or 15 days or whatever, or every day, for example, right, at night. which checks for an inactive users, which are 6 months older or 12 months older, whatever your requirements is. And if you find those, you can delete them, right? Based on your policies, your organization's requirement. But OutSystem by default will not delete any of those data.
Correct. So also, I'd like to add on this in terms of when you're developing applications, when you put a foreign key, especially the created by or modified by, it has a user ID tag. Now, if that is set to protect, then it will not allow you to delete the user, inactive user either. So if you want to be able to delete the inactive user, then you need to, wherever you're giving those references, you need to set it to ignore. But ideally, since it doesn't count towards your license, it's good to have those user IDs available from an audit log perspective. So even if a user has been deactivated after they have left the organization, at least you are able to identify who did what and which transactions were done by whom. Since it doesn't impact your licensing, I think it's okay to keep the inactive users in the DB.
Yeah, correct. Thanks, Subbu, for adding that. See, mostly, I mean, if you have very large number of users created and marked inactive on very frequently, like for example, let's say, I mean, taking very, very random example, right? Let's say NSDL e-voting website, for example, right? Where user once a while goes to that website for voting purposes, and then there's no other use case for that website, right? So let's say if I hold a share of particular company, and if I get once in a invite to go and vote for that particular share, I'll be visiting that website once, right? So the user will be created for me, and then once I voted, I'm done. I'm not gonna go to that website again, right? But that would be huge number of users, right? Lakhs and lakhs of users will be logging into that, and that could be for each of the shares or each of the company share. There will be different set of users, right? So if you have that number of users being created on a daily basis and then marked inactive on a daily basis, at that moment it would be good idea to delete them, because the user table will keep on growing and growing. But if you're not dealing with that kind of use case, right? If your users are very, very less, I mean, in thousands or in hundreds of thousands, then it is fine. It is not a problem at all, right? All right. So moving on. Uh, Now the second part, right? So we talked about the authentication, right? So that is a very, very basic thing, the first thing that you will do for any application. And by default, when you create an OutSystems application, it comes with an authentication, right? So it by default will add a login mechanism in front of your application. Now the second thing comes is the authorization, right? So once you have make sure that your users are authenticated, right? It is who that it is claiming. So if I am a Sohel, I will claim I'm claiming as a Sohel. You have verified that this is a Sohel because I have validated my username and password. Now the second part is authorization, where you say that okay, you are Sohel, but I need to check what authorizations or what permissions you have, and what kind of permissions you have to access this application, right? Whether you would be a user, whether you would be an admin, whether you will have a read access only for this particular application. Will you be able to add any data on this application? Are there any screens which are exclusively available for specific user only, right? So those are the authorization, right? Where you define the type of user based on their rules or based on their job criteria, or any other criteria that you define. Now, how you can do the authorization on our systems? So first of all, you have to set the role, right? The role of the user, whether the user is going to be a basic user, which is called as registered user by default in our system. You could then, add an additional, make your own roles as well, right? Whether it is user A, type user A, team leads, managers, whatever it could be, right? Now, this has to be defined by the developers, right? So when developers are developing an application, the roles has to be defined, And then you can configure or define the access of that role to an application level or at the screen level or at the row level, right? So what I mean by this, so at the screen level, you can simply on any screen you would have noticed there's roles that you can pick and assign, right? This will simply block that particular screen or allow that particular screen for specific users, right? And how you can do that is by just ticking the box, ticking the check marks on the user on the application page, right? Now, the second option is within the screen, there could be multiple users with a multiple role, right? So there could be one user who would have access only to view the data what is there in that particular screen. Another user would have an access to add an additional record, right? Or let's say there is and there's a business process, right? So there could be one user who could be uh, requester, right? A requester would be only who would be able to request for an authorization, request for some process, and the manager would be the one who would be approved. So their manager, if the manager logs into the same screen, he would be able to approve or reject or do any other options that are available. Similarly, you can also restrict the access to the row level. When I say row level, that's a similar example. Like I mentioned, there is a employee, for example, and he has requested for a leave, vacation, right? 7 days vacation, and then the manager is the one who would have a permission to either approve it or reject it. Now, when a employee logs in and he opens that vacation list, he should be able to see only his own vacation list, right? While the manager logs in, the manager would should be able to see the vacations of his entire team, right? So that is the row level restrictions. So all of this can be, controlled using the roles, right? And there are some functions which are available on the platform, like check integrated securities user role, which where you will need to pass the user ID, uh, whose you want to check the role, and then it will give you whether it has the what kind of roles he will have, right? And then you can, based on that, you can decide whether you want to put a check, not. You could also do hide some of the UI elements, right? So if there are any, like I mentioned, if there's a manager, he would see those buttons to approve, reject, so on and so forth. So those buttons can be hidden. So there is a enclosed in if uh, s- uh, statement available on your Outsystems UI, right? Where you can enclose it in if and then check for the role. If that role is available, then only those buttons will be rendered on the screen. Otherwise, those buttons will not be rendered, right? And this rendering happens on the server side. So when your HTML goes to the client, it's not that simply the HTML goes, but then the buttons are hidden from that. The HTML does not have those buttons at all if that user does not have the permission for viewing those buttons, right? So these are again, you can configure whatever access level you want to give to that particular users, and then you can programmatically restrict it as well, right? And these rules can be assigned to the user at the runtime as well, right? So if you have an application where dynamically you have to assign the roles, you have to just call the function and assign that role as well to the user. So that is also you can do. Now, just the relationship between the
Sohel, if you can just pause for a second. There is a question that has been asked if you would like to take it. While authorizing a user in reactive application for a screen element, what is the standard practice? Because OutSystems, we have seen devs use the JavaScript API integration, as well as data action to fetch and validate user roles on the client side.
Correct. That is correct. That is what is available on our system.
Yeah, so I think the question is, which is a better method, if at all there is a better method, using a JavaScript, is that the recommended approach, or a data action, or both are more or less the same?
So what is a data action? I might not be aware of that.
Okay, so data action is essentially when a screen renders, or when the screen is ready, like you call, yeah, like you get data from the
Yeah.
server side, you are pulling the entity. You can also write a client side action for data action, which fetches data from the server. So JavaScript uses the OutSystems APIs to fetch the role, while the data action also does the same thing. It's a server side call. In my opinion, I think both are okay. JavaScript, I believe, in my opinion, to be more lightweight. But irrespective of, and we covered this in episode one of this session. Irrespective of whatever client side validations you do for the role, if it has a server side connotation, or you are doing to commit a server action, you need to do server side validation as well. So when you are invoking server actions, please do validate the user role on both sides, both on the client side as well as on the server side. I would also like to add one more point related to the same. Is there are what Sohail mentioned in terms of enabling or disabling a button from the role perspective. That works on the client side. Rendering works well and best only if you encapsulate it in an if block. In that case, it will not render at all. So when the HTML comes, it doesn't render the button itself. But if you disable it or hide the visibility of the button, then the CSS and the HTML is still loaded, but it is disabled or made, the visibility is suppressed, which can be circumvented by the inspect page. Therefore, the best practice will always be to encapsulate it in an if, where you can check the what role the user has. Okay.
Yeah, Subbu, thank you. So that is what I mentioned. Right? So earlier, I mean, if you do use the if statement, that would be the server side whenever the page is rendered. I mean, when the JavaScript is created, at that time only that buttons or whatever the controls you are hiding will not be uh, created at all. The HTML will not be created for that at all. Right. So that would be the best way to do it. Right. But thank you, Subbu, for adding the context in that. Now, on the so like I mentioned, the roles can be created and then the roles can be assigned. The users can be assigned the roles, or the role can be assigned to the group as well, right? So if you have the groups, right, for example, in your if you're using third-party SSOs like Azure AD or any other right authentication tool, and you're managing groups there, right? You can assign the role uh, to the group as well, right? And then your user can be assigned to those groups. Right? Uh, okay, one thing to note here is that on the platform, there is no way to directly manage the database row or a column level access control, right? But you can, with a little bit of extra logic, you can build that logic based on the roles that you can define, and then you can based on that you can create your own logic to have, if your use case demands that, then you can do that with custom logic, right? uh, but that is not available out of the box. That is, I just wanted to also let you know, right? So that is very simple, the roles and the authentication. Now let's talk about a little bit of third party authentications as well, right? uh, So when you are doing a third party authentication, right? And Subbu, you can add your own context on this as well. So what happens is that this is how it works, right? So whenever your browser or whenever any page has been requested from the server, it internally you know checks for the login. If there is no login, it raises a security exception, and then it redirects to the no permission page, right? Which also again then looks if the user is logged in or not, and then it redirects to your login page. Now, if you have configured your third-party authentication system, it will then redirect it to your third-party authentication, like for example Azure AD or any other Facebook login or whatever, right? Then whatever your return URL or callback URL you have configured, authentication, uh, has been successful, failure, whatever. It you will be your callback screen will be called, and then based on the headers that you have configured from your third-party tool, you would be able to then decide the flow, whether you have logged in, right? Whether you need to do any extra check on top of it, or then directly present whichever screen you want to present on after the successful login. Right? So, uh, I mean, from a programmatical more context, I think Subbu will probably cover in next sessions or so, if you have not covered for this one. Uh,
Yes.
but yeah, Subbu, you're going to add something?
No, no, yeah, yeah. There has been some interest. So, like we said, right? So, this we are giving you an overview. We will be doing a deep dive in every method of this authentication in future episodes. So, yeah, we will definitely do a deep dive into this. Yes, Sohel.
Yeah, thanks. So again, so that is how the third-party authentication works. Similarly, also the SAML, right? So SAML is nothing but it's a protocol, right? For doing the SAML-based authentication, there is a component in Forge. I think there are other components as well. But this component, IDP component, is maintained by Outsystems, right? And it is mostly trusted, or probably advocated from Outsystems team. And whenever Outsystems professional team does the implementation, they also use this SAML. Unless and until there is no unique requirement, uh, this component does not need to be customized, and it has worked with most of the majorly used identity providers like Okta, OneLogin, Azure, so on and so forth. Right. So if you have those kind of requirement, you can use IDP component which is available in Forge. And then if you want to use any OAuth based authentication, again there are plethora of plugins available on Forge component to integrate with your Facebook login or Google login or LinkedIn login, right? Or any other OAuth based login as well. There is a generic OAuth login component available as well, which if none of this applies, you can use that as well. Right. So that is mostly about the authentication and the authorization of your web application. Now, uh, okay, let me just any questions on this one before we move to the next section.
Yeah, I don't see any questions, but I think yes, social logins will be very useful for when you're building a D2C app where you're trying to build an app for the general public as a whole. I think your social logins will definitely make sense, and OAuth is a widely supported standard. So yeah, there are a lot of Forge components out there. We'll see if we can also cover some of those in one of the deep dive episodes. If anybody has any questions, they can put it in the chat, or I think Sohel, we can continue and we can catch the questions at the end as well.
Sure, sure. Thank you. Okay, so there is also one thing which I wanted to just give you the. I've heard sometime, and then most of a lot of our customers doesn't know about this, right? So see, out of the box, what was available, we already showed, right? But there is also an additional thing which is also available from OutSystems. This is specifically for mobile applications, right? So if have or been working with very uh, compliance heavy organization, right? Where they need an extra level of security. So there are some security products available from OutSystems, not necessarily, but these are additional optional add-on top of our system, right? Which can also be used if there is a requirement. So one of that is AppShield. Now this AppShield is applicable only for mobile application, and you can, like I mentioned, if you are using any mobile, if you are developing a mobile application on OutSystems, you are able to use like you mentioned your third party login methods. You can you can do the biometric as well, right? All of you can do two factor authentication as well using SMS or using email, right? So all of those can still be done, but this is apart from that, right? This is going to a level of detecting the jailbreak on your device, right? Detecting if there is any emulators running, or is it the real device which is being used, right? So those kind of security requirements does come for very heavy compliance customers, which are specifically from BFSI customer, banking and finance customers, right? uh, so you would have used, for example, uh, any banking application, right, in India, and while you are on that application and you try to take a screenshot, it will not allow you to do that, right? It will say that capturing screenshot is not allowed, or your young generation might be on a Snapchat, right? On the Snapchat, if you try to take a screenshot, it does not allow you to do that. So that is because there's an additional layer on top of your normal development, right? Uh, so that is if that is the requirement, there is a product from OutSystem which is an add-on. It does not come with the OutSystem standard setup. It's an additional thing that, but if it comes up, you can take advantage of it. So now this is what it covers. AppShield from a feature perspective, you can do the jailbreak detection. If if in case of iOS it will be jailbreak, in case of Android it will be rooted. Repackaging, if there's that APK or iOS has been repackaged, you can detect that. So your reverse engineering protection is also there. A native code obfuscation. Again, code injection protection, emulator detection, keylogger protection, screenshot protection, like I mentioned. All of this is what you get as an additional feature using AppShield. Sorry. So that is from the what you have from authentication, authorization, and perspective. Also, let's take a look at the platform security, right? From a protecting your platform, right? So the first thing that you want to do when you're protecting your platform, an OutSystem platform, the security features available, going to use the applications which are developed on OutSystem, right? So if you're developed in banking, who are going to use that application, you have seen what are the methods available for authentication, authorization. So
Sohel, we lost your audio for the last
some
few minutes.
users are you and me, Wow. Okay.
Right. Sohail, I don't know if it was only we lost your audio for the last 30 seconds. Could you repeat?
Okay. The voice is audible.
Yeah, yeah, we can hear you now. At least for me, I lost
Okay.
your audio in between for about 30 seconds.
All right. Okay. So did I complete this?
Yeah, yeah. This we saw. I think when you started the next slide is when we lost out on the audio.
Sure, no problem. Okay, so what I was saying is that we have seen what are the options available for the users who are going to use the applications which are developed on our systems, right? So if you've developed the application and the user who are going to use that application, we have seen how to protect those users, authentication, authorization, AppShield, so on and so forth, right? Now we'll talk about the platform security and protecting the platform. So first thing that comes from a platform security perspective is the users of the platform, right? So users of the platform are like you and me who are going to develop the application on OutSystems, who are the developers, who are an admin of OutSystems, who are probably doing some maintenance activity on OutSystems, right? So those are the platform users, right? So from platform users perspective, again, you can either use the internal OutSystems SSO, right, to configure the platform users also. So platform users are your developers, your admins, your DevOps. All of these are the platform users. So these users can also need to authenticate, right? So when you go to a lifetime, when you go to service center, you get presented the log, then enter the username, password, and so on and so forth, right? So that also again you can use the internal SSO of OutSystems where your password are stored on the platform, or you can use the third-party authentication, which could be your Active Directory, your LDAP, your SAML, all of which we saw earlier, right? So again, you can use all of those for authentication. Authenticate your platform user as well, right? And similar to authentication, once you do the authentication using the tool of your choice or whatever the requirements of the customer is, you would then be also able to create a role or assign any existing role to the users, right? So there could be a different, there are the roles where you can, or you can create a custom role as well, and then you can define what are the permissions in that role. That particular users who will be assigned to that role will have what kind of permission. Now those permissions can be broadly you know restricted to the environment level, where you say that this user will have an access to development environment, or until pre-prod environment, or until prod environment. And then even if, let's say, the user has a access until the like this environment, what would be the permission in each of those environments, right? For example, in dev environment, the developers can deploy a new application, they can change the application, they can introduce a change to an application, they can add a new application, right? All of these things. But for the pre-prod and prod, they can just view the application. They can probably monitor the application, but they cannot deploy the new application to the production. Right? You could define a different role, like for example, team lead or the admin who could deploy those applications to production environment, so on and so forth. So this is again completely web-based, available to the administrators of the platform. They can go and configure these roles and then assign the users to the to whom the roles needs to be given to. All right. Third thing is also the platform APIs. So this is for the APIs which are out of the box available on the platform. So this is not sorry. So this is not the API that you develop on Outsystems. Okay, this is the API, platform API, which is available on the platform by default, right? So what are these APIs? These APIs are for the DevOps, right? So for example, you are using, let's say, Jenkins, right? Or any other deployment, new deployment, right? The API from the platform, which you will be calling from your third-party tools. And how you will be doing the authentication for that is using the service account. So you'll be creating a service account, and then that service account will give you a token which you will be using when you are calling an API as a bearer header token, right? Where you will be adding a bearer header and you will be passing the token value, right? So this is how you would be able to, use the protection available out of the box in the platform to protect your platform APIs, right? Now let's also see some of the configurations also, that are available from the platform level to secure your application, right? So these are some of the configurations available at the platform level to make your application secure. The first thing is to have the secure connections for your application, which also called as encryption in the transit, right? So what can you do when you are, the data is flowing between your client and your OutSystem server, right? You can force the HTTPS for all the requests, right? By default, everything flows on OutSystems using HTTPS. So all the applications which you develop does use HTTPS. But whether you want to force all the requests on HTTPS, just, I mean, this is all the configurations available to you. You have to just toggle the switch. Whether you want to force the HTTPS for all the requests or all the pages or all the integrations as well, right? And then you can also enable the content security, right? So first you make sure that your connection is secure. Then you want to also make sure the content is also secure, right? For the content, you can define, for example, which locations or you are able to accept the connections, or which locations you are going to accept the request, and which resources you are going to make available for those locations, right? Now, how do you make sure those locations is using the IP addresses, which brings us to the network security, right? So systems, you addresses or the range of IP addresses which you want to make as a, for example, some of the organization have this requirement, right? That uh, uh, my internal app from, I'm not in the in my company IP addresses. If I'm from an application, should not, right? It should not be accessible at all. So that you can do by defining what are the IP addresses that you say that are belong to your internal internal addresses. So you can define your company range or addresses, and then your applications, you can define those applications as an internal access only, right? So when you're defining an application as internal access only, then based on this IP addresses only, your request will be entertained. Otherwise, any other IP addresses where the request comes for those internal applications will not be entertained. Right. Also, add some the trusted proxy addresses as well. So if it's your request comes from either this proxy addresses or this network addresses, request you will not even see the login page of the application. It is also available on the platform. Uh, Again, from the mobile application authentication perspective, also there are some configurations available at the platform level, which you can also take advantage of. So there are, again, based on use case to use cases, you can set the cache time. You can set the you can reset or regenerate the authentication and encryption keys. So when you regenerate the authentication and encryption keys, all your sessions, all your the sessions of the mobile application will be reset, and everybody has to re-log in again, right? So that is something, if you want to do it, you can do that. Now, persistent login setting is also something which is available out of the box. So based on the use cases, you might have seen, for example, if you're using Paytm, right? Very common application in India, right? So if you're using Paytm, every time you open a Paytm, it does not ask you for a login screen, right? Once you have logged in, that's it. Log out by going to a menu or uninstall your application. It does not ask you for a login screen again, right? Um, but at the same time, for example, if you're using any banking application like HDFC application, or any other application, for example, right? Banking application. Every time you open that application, it will ask you for a login. And then when you close it, tomorrow you log in again, it will ask you for a login username and password again, right? This is because you would be setting a max for that particular application, right? So what is the idle time that you want to persist the login, right? So for example, if this is your max idle time is 7, which means that until 7 days the user does not open the app, you will log out them, right? In case of banking application, you could just keep this as 1 day. Similarly, you can also define the cookie expiration date, session. Also, idle time for a session, how long you want to persist the session. Uh, uh, Default time is 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Sorry, 30 minutes. But you can configure based on your use cases that what is the time that you want to keep the session active. So let's do a summary of application security perspective. What are the options available on the development tool as well as on the platform level, right? So if you split it into this 5 categories, the first category is built-in security framework, right? Which means that your SSO, right? There is a built-in SSO available which you can use, and you can do the role-based security. So entire role-based access control is built in. Even though if you're using an external authentication method, you can still leverage the role-based access control or in which is available in Outsystems, right? And you have the way to protect your APIs as well, right? So if you're developing in an Outsystems, that also you can do using basic authentication or any custom authentication as well, right? Or the API key based authentication as well. Right? Now, when I come to the second part, which is a code generation. So one thing that you might know is that OutSystems is a low-code platform. So definitely, whatever code we are writing, building as a developer, it is not an actual, right? So when I build an application, some flow, very complicated flow, right? All of this which I'm doing it from my service studio, created by the platform when you are deploying an application, right? So when you say when you do that one-click publish, right? And that is time when your entire application, yes, you have made, is taken as a visual application, and then the platform generates the equivalent .NET code in the backend, and that .NET code gets deployed to the server, right? So while that platform generates the code, platform makes sure that some of the things which can be done while generating the code will be done by default. So when I say some of the things which can be done by default, what I mean by that is, for example, you are using a table on a screen. Okay, so there's a customer table that you're using, and you are displaying a customer detail on a page using a grid, for example, right? And in that grid, you have three columns, right? So one is the customer name, second is customer email, third is customer address, for example, right? Now you're using this three field, and you have used the OutSystems aggregator to create the screen and then fetching the data from OutSystems. You did not define the query for that, but when your applications get deployed, OutSystem will generate the SQL query, and it will make sure only selects those three rows which are displayed on the screen, right? So those three rows will only be included in actual query, and then that query will be used, right? Apart from that, there will be a lot more optimization that our system will do for that query. So you are not aware of that, but our system will make sure that in a sense, uh, also when you've done you build an application from a screen level perspective, all the widgets that you have used, uh, it will make sure that the most optimized code is created, making sure the best practices from security and performance are by default followed while creating the code, because it's a machine generated code. So during by doing that, it makes sure that whatever OS top 10 guidelines are within the range of follow can be followed. Similarly, it makes sure that your cert secure coding patterns are also make sure wherever it is possible. Whenever you are doing any DB connections, it will use encrypted password for connecting to databases. Uh, SQL injection prevention and C sharp code injection prevention is by default it does. So any fields that you use, right, the forms that you use on application, like for example, you would have text input box for text or phone number, whatever in your entire application. If you go ahead and do injection on those fields, you will not find a successful SQL injection happening on those screens by default. You have not done anything for that, right? So all systems by default make sure that whatever inputs you are using, it makes sure sanitizes that inputs that you will pass on it, right? So it makes sure that there's no SQL injection, there's no code injections, right? Done. For example, if you're using a file upload widget in your form or in your page, and if you try to upload any junk file or malware file or whatever, right? It will not let you it will not let you store that file in the server, right? So those things are by default done. You as a developer are not going to be worried about those things. Of course, there is a limitation to this, right? So limitation is when you are using out of the box uh, out of the box tools in the platform. When I say that, what I mean is that if you are creating your or writing your own SQL query, right? So there is a in Outsystem we use aggregators, right, for building and query. But if you have done custom SQL, if you're using custom SQL and you have written that query, then if there is any performance related issues, that would not be, I mean, there is still a way to, if there is a issue with the performance or security, but that will not be protected by default on our systems, right? So if you are doing any custom code, right, you will bring your own C sharp code, or you bring your own JavaScript libraries, or you've written some JavaScript custom code application. Those code will not be warrant for this protections, right? So whatever custom code that you are doing on our systems, you have to make sure that you are making sure that code is secure from this guidelines. But whatever code OutSystem is generating, OutSystem platform will make sure that it is warrant for all of this protection, right? Similarly, for any DB connection, all the DB connection pools is completely, dedicated and isolated. Session identifier, there's a very strong session identifier. All system uses its own custom built session identifier validation mechanism. So you're not able to, play with the session and modify the session validity, right? So that is also that you can. This is available from the platform by default. On this part, the code generation part, that I come across a lot from a lot of customers, their infosec review and their SAST and DAST testing, right? Now, sometime you might see from infosec team that there are few things like few cookies which are used. For example, for session identifier, there's a nr user 1 and nr user 2, something like that. Cookies are available, right? And it gives the user name or user id of the user for that application, right? And then we have seen a lot of customer complaints saying that you know it is giving the sensitive information. Your session identifiers are not that strong, so on and so forth, right? But so far, we have not seen any customers infosec team that has been able to crack those session identifiers. Right? So when we ask the customers saying that, okay, if that is so, can you tell us how this is not secure? And if you are able to break anything from that, and if you have done anything on that, can you share it with us? So we've not seen any of those, occurring, happening in any of the customers, right? So you might get some of those if you are being involved in, infosec reviews and all. You might get those queries, but then you have to understand if there is any risk involved with those, right? And if it is available, and if it is a genuine legit risk, it is able to crack to the system, then you can open a support ticket on Outsystems, and the support team will involve PM team, and then you will be able to help you. But 99.9% of the times, these are positives, right? So that is something that you have to also keep in mind. Now, from a deployment and architecture perspective, we know, I mean, we can do the application isolation in different front ends, right? So you can basically, if you have seen OutSystems architecture diagram, there are different environments, and each environment can have different multiple servers, multiple front end servers, right? You can basically isolate your applications in different front end servers based on the deployment zone. That is something that, from an architecture discussion perspective, but just letting you know, if you have those kind of, you can do that. Like, for example, you have, internal applications and external applications. You can do that in a different deployment zones as well. And each of from OutSystems hosted environment perspective, you have the multi-tenant architecture, right? So each of the OutSystems customer gets their own dedicated tenant. So there is data segmentation by default available from different customers' perspective. Right? From runtime and configuration perspective, we do have SSL support, right? So you customers can actually upload their own SSL certificates, and then the HTTPS connection will be based on that particular uh, certificate. You can have the Windows integrated authentication, Active Directory authentication, or centralized configuration for your users and roles. That is all we have seen, right? IT security and governance perspective, there is role-based access control, like I mentioned. Network-based security, like we saw, you can restrict the IP addresses from where you want to entertain the request. There's detailed log of the IT operations also available. Everything that happens on the platform, everything is logged in the log database, and it can be viewed from your service stand center as well. So all the instrumentation happens for all the events, and then you can do those centralized monitoring and auditing as well. You can also forward this logs to your SIEM tools. For example, a lot of customer uses Splunk or Datadog or any other thing, right? So you can basically forward all of these logs from the platform to your own tool, and then there you can monitor those logs on that tool, and build your own monitoring and logic to identify if there are any risk in that particular logs as well, right? So we have seen customers, if they want to, they can do that as well. Any so far? Okay, so there is a question.
So,
What
yeah,
about
there are a couple of
secure cookies? Okay, so the first question is, what about secure cookies? So there is an option available on OutSystems Service Center, I believe, where you can enable the secure cookies. Right? It's just a tick that you have to enable, and then your secure cookies will be enabled. Subbu, add any context if there is any additional information that you need to add on this, right? Okay. Second question: how to authenticate for mobile application in offline flow in PWA? Okay, so when you want to authenticate in an offline flow in PWA, what do you mean by authentication, right? See, there are, when you're talking about through server, right? So when you want to validate username and password, uh, which is stored at server, whether it is your third party, whether it is OutSystems, the only way that you would be able to authenticate it is by connecting to that server, right? So that would be the true authentication. But if let's say you want to make something like I mentioned, you will have the once you will do the login, and then you will have the idle time set for example 15 days or so, and in between that every time you open the app, you can have that touch ID authentications, for example, right? Which would be a soft authentication, not the hard authentication. So it will not actually go and validate the username and password to the server, but make sure that the user whose phone this belongs to is accessing this application. That you can do even offline as well, right? So you can add the biometric authentication, face or a fingerprint, and you can do that in an offline mode, right? But if you want to do with the server, you have to go online for that. Third question is, if hacker gets the username, then he can try brute force or direct attack as he already knows the username. So there is a good chance to guess the password. What is your take on this? Sure, Naveen. So what happens is that OutSystems is, and again going to be covered in my when I cover the next slide on platform security and the infrastructure security, right? So this gets to infra security, right? And if you are an OutSystems customer who has hosted platform on our cloud, on OutSystems cloud, then OutSystem uses AWS, right? So everything, all the environments, everything is deployed on OutSystems, right? This is what my next slide is going to cover from. So this is the shared responsibility of our AWS, right? So AWS embed this protection by default. So any beat any even if you're using AWS for any other services, right? When you create an EC2 instances, it is by default brute force protected, right? So all those brute force connections it tries to make, it will detect it, right? And it will protect it at the infra level itself, not even at the platform or if at the application level. Even at the infra level, the AWS will block it, right? And we have not seen any. I mean, there are brute force detections as well. Then there are also things like denial of service attacks, right? So these are all taken care at the infra level itself. Right, so that is what I'm going to cover. So infra security. So this is so our systems cloud is hosted on AWS, and on AWS there is a concept of virtual private cloud. So virtual private cloud is nothing but a dedicated infrastructure which is created for, right. So for example, HDFC is one customer, another customer, then HDFC will have its own infrastructure, right, dedicated own infrastructure, and Yes Bank will have its dedicated infrastructure on AWS, right? So that is what OutSystems uses to keep the dedicated, isolated infrastructure for each customer, uh, and then they can connect to the on the VPN, and they can use their own customer, right? Now patching, operating system update, patching of the servers, and as well your platform. For OutSystems cloud customer is OutSystems responsibility. So OutSystem will patch the operating system, update the operating system. It will update the the platform as that is done by. If it is on-prem customer, means the self-managed customer are deploying the OutSystems platform on their own infrastructure, then it is responsibility to do that, right? This is something, I'll just quickly let you glance it. There is, nothing. I mean, what this talks about is that, there is a dedicated team in OutSystems called CSIRT, which, looks for whatever greatest is from a security threat perspective, and they work, uh, um, to protect the OutSystems platform from all kind of threats that are emerging and in the world. Similarly, there is privacy, data protection. Again, I mean, all of this is from a compliance perspective. If you are interested, you can let me know. We can have more discussion on this one. But this is just for you in case you need this from the very list of. Uh, uh, so this is what I was talking about, right? So uh, level security, physical security, security is all managed by AWS. Hardening of OS, right? Patching OS, this is all taken care. Backup solutions, this is all taken care by OutSystems. Uh, I guess we all know is also very uh, secure and compliance to most of the compliance certifications. So we do get those certificates from AWS as well. Now, there's also one more thing which I just wanted to add one or two slides on OutSystems Sentry. Now, in some instances, some organizations require a very, very high level of compliance security. Uh, at the infra level or at a platform level. And in that case, there is again, this is an addition from OutSystem. It does not come with the standard OutSystems. It's called OutSystem Sentry. It's a security focused product, which adds an additional feature from a security perspective to your OutSystems platform. Right? Uh, Now, this is very one summary of what is available on OutSystems by default, right? Um, and we talked. These are the certifications. You have the transit gateway on-premise or your AWS. Uh, you have the limit ability to limit application access by IP address range, 24/7 help, dedicated virtual cloud. You use a certificate. You have proxies. You can run your own penetration and vulnerability testing, disaster recovery in terms of RPM, RPO and RPO. There are different RPO and RPO available on our systems. There is a data in transit encryption available with HTTPS with TLS 1.2. All of this is 9 weeks log retention. Now this is all from on our system by default. With Sentry, there's additional things which gets added, and that is one is like for those organizations with SOC which requires SOC compliance, or HIPAA compliance, or PCI DSS compliance, right? So there are additional security features that this compliance requires, right? And those security features comes with Sentry. So if these three compliance are required, then this particular Sentry needs to be there on our system platform. It comes with real-time integrity monitoring for file folders, processes, settings, and codes. Real real-time security monitoring, dedicated IT team. It adds an intrusion prevention using Splunk and Trend Micro. These are the tools that we use in the backend. Comes with 1 year log retention, and then the RTO and RPO time gets reduced drastically. From RTO time gets reduced from 4 hours to 15 minutes. RPO gets reduced from 24 hours to 1 minute, and uptime goes to 90.195 times. So this is all added feature from Sentry. I mean, it's good to know. If there's some requirement that some customer has, then there is an option available on our systems. Compliance and documentation are all on our systems website. If there any your team or your infosec team ask you for these questions, you can refer them to security.outsystems.com, or you can go and download the documents and send it to them as well. All right, that is, I think, most of it. Any questions so far? Okay, so I
I
have a
think there's
question
one
here.
question on multi-tenant.
Yeah, so if I have a B2B multi-tenant application, how is that isolated data isolation is carried from security perspective in such cases? Yeah, so like Nikhil, like I mentioned earlier also, there is no rule level data segregation available out of the box on the platform. The way you can do is by creating a rule, right? Are so our system allow you to create roles, and then based on that role you will be able to manage that multi-tenant for your same applications, right? So and then whenever you are fetching any records uh, uh, from an OutSystems application, you will make sure that you have that where clause in each of your queries, you know and you're making sure that your whichever tenant you are allowed to access the data from, you are accessing from that data from that tenant only, right? So that is a little bit of custom logic that you have to add, but it is not available out of the box. What is available out of the box is the roles, but you can make use of that role and a little bit of extra coding. You should be able to achieve the multi-tenant. Subbu, you want to add your own experience on
Yeah,
top
I
of this?
think yeah, I think multi-tenancy by default, is something that's already enabled within our systems. And if your users are created within separate tenants, then to a large extent that is automatically taken care of when you are aggregating data for a particular tenant. So I think we can look at the best practices for multi-tenancy. I'll share the resource. Multi-tenancy is available, and therefore the tenant ID is put in the DB like Sohel said, and there are design patterns for that can be utilized. And the tenant ID is what is used for the isolation. Within OutSystems, it's all in the same DB, it's all in the same table, but you have the identification of which record is for which tenant and which user is for which tenant, and accordingly the design patterns and the code patterns have to be utilized in order to ensure that the tenant can only see the data relevant to his tenant, or the user for that tenant can only see the data that is relevant to his or her tenant.
Sure, thank you, Subbu.
Okay. Yep. Yep. All right. That was a great session, Sohail. We give everyone a couple of minutes to ask any questions. Guys, do you have any questions? Okay. If there are no more questions, then we can go on to the next exciting part of the session, which is going to be the quiz, right? So yeah, let me bring that up, and I'll share that soon. One second. Okay. Okay. All right, guys. The quiz is up. So do share your do scan and join the quiz. Okay. We've got a total of 23, 24, I think 25. This should be one more. We'll give it 30 seconds more for the one guy who's not joined yet, or maybe that's me. No, there we go. We got all 26. All right, great. Okay, so let's start the quiz. Everybody joined? Okay, starting the quiz now. Great. 95% of you guys got it right. All right. Let's look at the leaderboard. Very, very close competition. Okay, next question. Again, great. 64% of you guys got it right. All right, we're seeing some movement. And that is correct. 91% of you got it right. Akash still maintaining the lead, but people are closing up. Looks like Sohel, you had a great session and people really paid attention, huh?
Uh, Giving a stuff competition.
Great,
Wow,
great.
90%.
Fantastic, fantastic. Akash still maintaining the lead, huh? After four questions. Fantastic. Okay. Now you know you don't get free S3 storage with the Outsystems cloud environment, but not bad. Ah, a new leaderboard. Nice. I, but there's still chance. Three more questions to go. Come on, give it your all. The database server is always encrypted at rest by default in Outsystems. And this is also a good example of reading the question right and not being in a hurry, because the question was which of this is false. I think that tripped some of you guys. Okay. Are fighting back? Okta is supported in O11. Okay. All right. For the next question now. Hmm. OutSystems application are SSO enabled by default.
Wow, surprising result.
That's a surprising result, yes.
Uh,
Um,
yeah, Every application you create on Outsystems, by default, you will get a login screen. That is the SSO. That is the default SSO.
All applications within the OutSystems environment are single sign-on by default.
All
All
right.
right.
So now is
We've got
the
one
last
last
chance.
question. Which of this is not an OutSystems security offering? Defender is by Microsoft, but Sentry and AppShield are offered by OutSystems. All right. Drum roll, please, for the final leaderboard. All right. Congratulations to the winners. Now, this is going to be an on board. We're going to maintain all the leaderboards across the episodes of the masterclass, and at the end of this, we will put together a combined leaderboard, and from that, we will select winners who will win swag kits as well as some certification vouchers. But once again, let's give it up for Sohail for a fantastic session, and give it up for you guys also. You've been fantastic participants as well. Let me quickly bring up the one slide for you guys to take a look at. This is if you've not already a part of the OutSystems user group. I would encourage you guys to come and join the OutSystems user group. Um, Let me just bring that up a second.
Yeah, again, I mean, great audience as well. Very engaging session. Pleasure to be
Yes.
here. Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, Subhash, to inviting me and having me here.
It's been fantastic having you, Sohail. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. You guys can reach out to Sohail on LinkedIn as well. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's my QR code. You can scan that. We have an OutSystems user group Mumbai WhatsApp group as well as the group on the actual website as well, on the OutSystems website, on the user group forum. Scan those codes and join. And if you guys are okay, once in the next after a couple of minutes, if you can turn your videos on, we'll take a digital selfie, which I'll upload on LinkedIn as well. And you guys can DM me your LinkedIn URLs if you want me to tag you in that post as well. Again, thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know today is Ganesh Chaturthi as well. A lot of you guys must be having celebrations at home. Wishing all of you a great and a happy Ganesh Chaturthi. And we will see you guys in the next episode. So if you guys have any suggestions, add it to join the WhatsApp group. Give us your feedback. Give us your comments. DM me on LinkedIn. Connect with me, and we will take your inputs and we'll try and make these sessions better and more engaging. Hope you guys had a great time. Let me stop sharing and turn on my video for a quick second here. And yeah, if you guys want to go ahead and turn on your videos as well, we'll have a quick selfie, and we'll break for the day. Okay. So uh, Sohail, your video went away. Okay, there you go. All right, everyone say cheese. All right, we got that. Okay. All right, fantastic. I will put up the post on LinkedIn. As I think someone asked the question in terms of the sessions being recorded. Yes, they are being recorded. We are setting up the YouTube channel for the same. Once the posts are up, we will put update the event pages with the links for the videos. Please do go ahead and share that with your colleagues and your community members. See you guys in the next episode. Till then, have a fantastic Ganesh Chaturthi. Have a fantastic couple of weeks. See you in the next episode. Thank you. Thank you all.